I never imagined my life would become so numb. I used to think marriage was supposed to be a slow burn, not a dying flame. My husband, Eric, was always away on business trips, and when he was home, he was more interested in his emails than my eyes. We stopped kissing a year ago. I don't even remember when he last touched me like he used to. I wasn't unhappy, just faded. Like an old painting hung too long in the sun. When Alex, my stepson, came home for the summer, I expected the same shy, lanky teenager I'd last seen 3 years ago. What I got was a grown man, confident, sharp, taller than his father, with eyes that saw everything. He hugged me the moment he walked in. It wasn't long, not inappropriate, but I felt it, the warmth I hadn't felt in years. The way he said my name, Jenna. Not mom, not stepmom. Just Jenna. As if he saw me. The first few days were normal. Dinners, small talk, polite smiles. But something was different. He actually listened when I spoke. When I laughed at one of his jokes, he looked at me like it mattered. And then one afternoon, I caught myself watching him mow the lawn, shirt off, sweat glistening down his back. I turned away fast. But it was too late. I felt the heat rise to my face. He came in afterward, and when our eyes met, I wondered if he noticed too. At night, I started dressing a little better. Nothing obvious, just lighter fabric, softer colors, a touch of perfume. Silly, right? A married woman, hoping to feel seen. I kept telling myself it was harmless. He was just a young man. I was just being vain. Still, I started lingering longer in the kitchen when he was around. Our conversations stretched past dinner. He'd ask about my work, my favorite books, my childhood. Things Eric hadn't asked me in years. I felt real again. One evening, we sat on the back porch. It was quiet, golden hour. He said, "You don't smile much when Dad's around." I didn't answer. What could I say? That he was right? That I didn't even remember how it felt to be happy in my own home? So instead, I just said, "I guess I forgot how." He looked at me differently after that. Not like a boy with a crush, but like a man seeing a woman hiding in plain sight. That night, as I lay in bed, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that it would pass. But I couldn't deny it. Something had shifted. And I wasn't sure I wanted it to shift back. The next few days were filled with moments that felt like secrets, even though nothing had happened yet. I'd walk into a room, and Alex would already be looking at me. He didn't look away like most people do when they're caught. He held it, steady, bold, unashamed. I tried not to react, but inside I felt it. A current running under everything we said and didn't say. One night, he helped me clean up after dinner. I dropped a glass, and he caught it just before it hit the floor. His hand brushed mine, and neither of us moved. For a second, we just stood there, fingers touching, eyes locked. He smiled, that slow, knowing smile, and let go. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I started waiting for those small touches. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. When he passed behind me and his hand lightly grazed my back, when he leaned too close to hand me something, I didn't pull away. I let it happen. He was so careful, so controlled, but I could feel it. He wanted me to notice. And I did. One afternoon, he came home from the gym, sweat-drenched shirt clinging to his chest. I looked up from my book and froze. He caught me looking, and instead of pretending I wasn't, I held his gaze. That moment lasted too long. He didn't smile this time. His jaw tightened. Then he went upstairs, silent. That night, it rained hard. Thunder rolled in like a warning. I couldn't sleep. I turned and tossed, the sheets too warm, my mind louder than the storm. Around midnight, there was a knock. I said nothing, but the door opened anyway. Alex stood there, shirtless, his hair damp from the shower, or maybe from the rain. He asked if I was okay. I nodded. He stayed at the door. I told him to come in. He didn't move right away, then took 2 slow steps inside. He looked unsure, but not afraid. The air between us was electric, painful almost. He sat at the edge of the bed. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Neither of us said a word. My heart thudded so loudly, I thought he could hear it. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered near my cheek, warm, trembling slightly. My breath caught. He leaned in, but stopped an inch away from my lips. His eyes searched mine, waiting. I turned my face, heart pounding, and whispered, "You should go." He didn't argue. He stood, nodded once, and walked out, quietly closing the door behind him. I lay awake for hours after that. My body was still shaking, not from fear, but from restraint. Something had been set in motion. I'd opened the door and closed it too late. I knew the next time, neither of us would stop. It started with silence. Days passed where we barely spoke more than necessary. He kept his distance. I pretended not to notice, but the air still pulsed with everything unspoken. The weight of that night sat between us like a secret neither of us wanted to own yet couldn't forget. I caught him watching me once from the hallway when he thought I wasn't looking. His eyes weren't curious anymore, they were hungry. And I didn't look away. Eric was gone again. Another trip, another empty house. I cooked dinner that night more out of habit than need. Alex didn't join me at the table. I left his plate on the counter, untouched. Around midnight, I sat on the couch, glass of wine half empty, trying to lose myself in anything else. I didn't hear him come down. Suddenly, he was there, standing in the doorway. His expression was different, serious, unresolved. He asked me if I was going to keep pretending. I didn't answer. He walked closer and said it again. I felt cornered, not by fear, but by everything I'd been denying. I stood up, told him he needed to go back upstairs. He didn't. He asked me one question. "Do you want me to stop?" I couldn't lie. I didn't speak, didn't move. He took that as his answer. The kiss came fast, like we'd both been holding our breath for too long. His lips found mine with a kind of desperation that left no room for second thoughts. I kissed him back. I couldn't stop myself. His hands moved like he already knew every inch of me. My body responded before my mind could protest. Every suppressed thought, every lonely night, every quiet ache, they all exploded at once. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was real. We didn't speak through any of it. Words would have ruined it. Words made it real, and we weren't ready for real. When it was over, I laid there barely breathing. He rested beside me, his arm over his eyes, chest rising and falling hard. I wanted to ask what this meant, what would happen now, but I was terrified of the answers. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, drowning in guilt I hadn't felt during, only now, in the quiet. I turned to him. He was already asleep, or pretending. I watched him for a while, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the shape of his lips. I felt sick. Not because it happened, but because I didn't regret it. I should have. I knew that. But all I could think about was how alive I'd felt. And that scared me more than the guilt. I slipped out of bed and stood by the window, watching the darkness. I knew this was the moment everything changed. There was no going back now. The morning after was colder than it should have been. Not the weather, us. He got dressed without looking at me. I stayed in bed, eyes open, watching the ceiling like it could give me answers. He mumbled something about needing to go out, and then he was gone. Just like that. No touch. No goodbye. No sign that last night had ever happened. I stayed in that room for hours, unable to move. Every sound in the house felt louder than usual. I kept waiting for the guilt to swallow me whole, but it didn't. Not really. I felt shame, yes, and fear, but also a strange sense of calm. I'd crossed a line, and I wasn't sorry for it. That's what disturbed me the most. When Eric came back 2 days later, everything inside me felt split in two. I greeted him like I always did, kiss on the cheek, polite questions, fake laughter. He didn't notice anything. He never did. We sat at the dinner table, the three of us. Alex barely spoke. I did all the talking. Eric talked about flights and meetings. The usual noise. I caught Alex looking at me once, briefly. His face was unreadable. We didn't speak alone for days. Every time I passed him in the hall, my body tensed. He wouldn't touch me, wouldn't even look too long. I started wondering if it had meant anything to him at all. Maybe it was just a mistake in his eyes, a one-time act of impulse. But for me, it was more. Not just sex, it was something I couldn't name. Something I hadn't felt in years. Like waking up after years of sleep. I tried to act normal, but everything inside me was chaos. The memory of his hands on me, his mouth, his breath, it didn't fade. It lived in me now. I'd go to bed next to my husband and close my eyes, pretending not to feel disgusted with myself. I'd replay that night, even when I didn't want to. Especially when I didn't want to. Then one night, I found Alex in the kitchen alone. I asked if he wanted to talk. He shook his head and said, "It can't happen again." His voice was cold, final. I nodded. What else could I do? He walked past me and said nothing else. That was it. No closure. No comfort. Just a quiet ending. Now I live with the weight of it all. The lies, the longing, the guilt. I don't know what he feels. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I'll never ask. I can't. Some things are better buried. But every time I see him, the memory flashes back, sharp and unrelenting. He was just my stepson. Until he wasn't. And no matter how many times I try to rewrite that night in my head, the truth doesn't change. It happened. I let it. And part of me will always want it to happen again.